There we go. So welcome everyone, and welcome our coaches. This is our Canadian Sports Center Atlantic Podium Performance Series 4. This sounds crazy, but we're into the 2021-2022 Performance Series season. So what we did this year is we decided to divide them into 2 streams. So we're going to do some Community Coach Series, which this is one of them, and then some Olympic Coach Series, which is some chats with our Olympic coaches that have returned back from Tokyo further into the fall. So welcome to our very first session. We're very excited to see everyone back. I'll ask, if you haven't already, if you could mute your mic and just keep it muted throughout this session. We love cameras on to say hi to everyone. And then if you want to turn it off when Camilla's presenting, that's awesome. For those of you I haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name's Natasha. I'm here in our coaching department at the Canadian Sports Center Atlantic. And I help organize all of these podium sessions, and I'm here to support all of you as coaches on the line. And we have coaches from across Atlantic Canada joining. So this is one of our very cool opportunities that we now have with the use of Zoom. We have a nice group online. So my last throw out, if you haven't already, please put your full name and your sport and take a look at who's on the line in the participants, because this is our community of Atlantic coaches that we're going to try to get to know over the next series of months. We are recording today, and of course you will get credit in the CAC locker. So when I'm done and I turn it over to Camilla, I will be taking attendance and throwing it into the locker in about the next week or so. I think that's it for housekeeping. So I'm going to introduce our speaker. We're very excited to have Dr. Camilla Knight, and this came out of a conversation from hearing feedback from probably many of you. So I was hearing from a lot of our community coaches and reading through some of our Atlantic Coaching Conference feedback and other feedback where we constantly ask you guys, what do you want to hear more about? And many of those comments were around parents, how to work with parents, how to have positive things happening with our parents, how to have parent coaches, how to not have parent coaches. There's just lots of the word parent thrown out. And it came through a conversation with speaking with a colleague in Calgary who said, well, have you heard of Dr. Camilla Knight? She's in the UK with some ties to Canada, and she would be great on this topic. So I did some digging into her, reached out and went, oh my goodness, this is exactly who we need, because we haven't found someone to come in and talk on this particular subject in the past with this amount of kind of background behind them. So that's why we're so excited to have Camilla here today. And for all of you guys to know, she'll be back again in January. So we have her booked for 2. So today, take some notes. This is sort of the first session of hers, and then we will build on today and have her come back in January, which is also excited. So who is Dr. Camilla Knight? She's a professor in sports psychology and youth sport at Swansea University in the UK, and a visiting professor at the University of Agder in Norway. Did I say that right? Okay, great. She's also the youth sport lead with the Welsh Institute of Performance Science and a member of the Welsh Safeguarding in Sport Strategy Group. Her research interests are concerned with understanding and enhancing the psychosocial experiences of children in sport, with a particular focus on the influence of parents. So this is why it's so great. And Camilla is co-author of Parenting in Youth Sport, From Research to Practice, which was done in 2014, and co-author of Sport Psychology for Young Athletes, which was done in 2017. She's published over 25 book chapters on topics related to parental involvement in sport and has 50 peer-reviewed journal articles. So lots of information to share with you afterwards as well. And I can put the names of those books into the chat if anyone is interested after. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Camilla to chat with you guys.
Perfect. Thanks, Natasha. And thank you all for indulging me for the next hour while I talk about what really is my passion. I appreciate that parents aren't always the passion of coaches necessarily, and having worked in this area for a long time, I'm very aware, and I do have a coaching background myself, so I am aware of some of the challenges that maybe can be encountered. But I hope over the next hour or so to just share some experiences, share some ideas, but I really would like to think of this as the start of a conversation. So you'll see my email address on the slides when I share them, and I'm more than happy to respond to emails, to share resources. I can send Natasha some things that maybe would be of interest to people, and yeah, we can just sort of have some conversations in advance of maybe the next session in January, because what I'm going to present to you today really is kind of maybe some higher level, hopefully stimulate some thinking with some really much more specific ideas coming in January. Just to confirm, Natasha, you're still seeing the right slides, right? Fantastic. Okay, so just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm hoping to cover, I want to talk a little bit about who I am and why I like this area so much, but more importantly than that, I want to talk about parents, why they are so important, and why I have spent the last 15 plus years researching in this area. And then I want to talk about the value of understanding parents, and really the focus of my talk, as you will see from the title here, is creating what I've liked to term a parent positive environment. Now that's not a term that's broadly used, it's my own term, but there's a reason for it, and I'll explain it as we go through. So as Natasha mentioned, this is the area that I've specialized in for a long time. So I grew up playing tennis, and I think it's fair to say that I was very lucky in the sense that I had parents who were very supportive, but my parents hated me being involved in sport. No, they didn't hate it. No, that's unfair. My dad was the one who took me to tennis and was always present and really engaged. My mum found it very, very stressful. She found it really challenging having someone who placed a lot of value on sport, who traveled a lot, who was constantly being influenced by whether she won or lost. And so based off that experience, I was doing my undergrad study at Loughborough University here in the UK. And we have to do research projects as part of that work. And I just was chatting to my mum and I said, I think I want to do something around parents and coaches. And she said to me at that point, if you're going to research parents, that's great, but try not to just tell parents all the things they're doing wrong. Because parenting's really hard and there's a lot of pressure placed on parents. And that conversation that I had with my mum back then, over 15 years ago now, really stuck with me and has shaped the approach that I've adopted. And since becoming a parent myself, it's really reinforced to me the importance of considering sort of the parent's perspective. And we'll talk about that through this session. The research that I produce is what I call applied research. So I'm really interested in understanding things so that we can put it into practice. And so one of my favorite things is talking around this topic, working with sports organizations, working with coaches, and trying to figure out how can we make the lives of young people, parents and coaches, and others involved in sport more positive and more enjoyable. And so when I talk here, I am drawing on research that I've mostly conducted and also colleagues that I've worked with, but really with an emphasis on what can we take from this research and apply in practice. So let's start off. That's enough about me. Without parents, sport really wouldn't exist as it currently does. Now, we could have a debate around whether we want youth sport to exist in the forum that it does, but I think that's a little beyond the scope of this talk. But parents are the people who register children. They're the people who take them to training sessions. They're the people who are always present, picking up the pieces when things go wrong, reinforcing the learnings, and really without parents, I say this a little tongue-in-cheek, but we wouldn't have coaches. If we didn't have people signing children up to sport, we wouldn't have sport opportunities. Now, the role of parents expands considerably. So when children first start in sport, we know that parents, as I mentioned, are the ones that provide opportunities. Hopefully, they're encouraging children to participate in multiple activities, choosing activities that are fun and enjoyable. But beyond that, through the way that parents talk about sport, through the sport they participate in themselves, they really do have an opportunity to instill a love of sport, to make sure effort and improvement is really highlighted. And potentially something that's really key is helping children to realize that actually they're good at sport and there's things that they can excel in within that setting, and reach their own potential, and reinforcing some confidence around that is really key. That's just when children start out. Then as children sort of progress in sport, we know that parents play a really, really important role in supporting decisions around sport involvement. Which sports should children carry on doing? How much do they want to commit? What clubs do they want to be involved with? Parents play an important role in helping to manage transitions. So moving between clubs, changing coaches, changing schools, changing teams, all of those are things that can be challenging for young people, and parents play a really important role in supporting that. Obviously, parents have to work with coaches, working with yourselves, making sure that there's good communication, that the athletes are supported, that the ideas being suggested within training sessions are reinforced at home. So there's a really important role of parents there around communicating. And a key one is obviously around providing support for training and competition. Are parents able to reinforce the ideas that you as coaches want them to develop, and also reinforce the ideas that they as parents think are important for their children? Additionally, in building off some of those ideas when children first start in sport, we know that parents play a really, really important role in protecting children's perceptions of their competence. So as children develop, as they become teenagers, there is the potential for their perceptions of their sporting abilities or physical abilities to start to drop. And parents play a really important role in reinforcing to children that they are, they do have opportunities to be successful and they do have physical capabilities. And then finally, as young people develop even further, moving into maybe specializing or really focusing on specific support as a specific sport, parents play really important roles providing emotional support, financial support, supporting the broader network that young people are working with, helping again young people adapt to transitions, and really here starting to take the lead from the athletes. So, as a parent, hopefully what you can see there is they're really involved, and there's a lot of things that they need to be doing, and that that their participation is important for, but they're also going on a journey. So over the course of a young person's involvement in sport, what parents need to do or how parents need to be involved changes over time. So it's not as simple as simply stating, parents should do this and they shouldn't do this, but they have to navigate this journey along the way. But the overall intent, or what we would suggest in terms of what we want from parents, is three things. I said three things. We want parents to be involved in a way that will enhance children's opportunities to achieve their sporting potential, whatever that potential is for that young person. Enhances the likelihood that children will have positive experiences. I think that's hopefully what we're all involved in youth sport for. And also help children to develop and gain that huge range of benefits that we all know are associated with sport. How do you do that though as a parent? Well, there's three things that we would encourage. And this is where you as coaches start to become really important with regards to the work that you do. So parents need to take care of their relationship with their child. They need to develop good communication. They need to develop an understanding of what children want. They need to adapt their practices and their involvement to the needs of their child. And as I said, adapt those roles and those influences over the journey. They also need to work with the wider support network. So they need to work with yourselves as coaches. They need to work with maybe agents if you get to that point, or they need to work with physios, strength and conditioning coaches, performance analysts, teachers, etc., and other parents. But to do that, to develop those relationships and to develop the relationship that they need with their child within sport, this point in the middle is particularly important. And that is parents need to take care of their own needs. And I use the image here of the oxygen masks from an aeroplane, because as a child, I never understood why they said that adults should put those on first before they helped out children. As I've researched around this area and I've spent more time as an adult, I really now understand that if you're not taking care of yourself, it's really hard to take care of somebody else. And that is something that we see within sport. And it's something that is, I think, often forgotten or often ignored when we talk about parenting in general. But when we definitely when we talk about sport parents, is that if we want parents to be able to do all of those things I've just said and to be positively involved in their child's sporting experience, to develop great relationships with everyone in that environment, there has to be some protection and there has to be some support for parents themselves. So what's my kind of key take home from those few sides? If you take nothing away from everything I've just said there, except this point, then I'll be happy, which is, parents really are influential and their involvement is really, really important in sport, and it changes over time, but it's really complicated. And it's complicated not only because of what we want and we need from parents, but because of what's going on for parents themselves. So what does that mean? What am I talking about here? Well, I've done a lot of research around the parent experience. And what we know is that parenting children involved in sport, I can send you any of these papers, by the way, if anyone wants them. Parenting children involved in sport can be really, really challenging. When we talk to parents, and this is where my research started out, the list of stresses, the list of demands, the list of challenges that parents recall about having children involved in sport is extensive. I was doing interviews with parents who were breaking down in tears, who are telling me they've remortgaged their house to support their children, whose relationships have broken down because of the time committed to sport, who have had to navigate feelings of guilt around which child do I support, whose competition do we go to, worrying about children missing out on social opportunities. Do I take them out of school for a competition or should they be at school? How do I manage injuries? How do I manage perceptions of favoritism? What do I do when coaches don't give me information? And that's all without considering the sheer emotion involved with watching children compete at competitions. So concerns for parents around, well, my child is looking upset. How do I cope with that? What do I say to help them feel better? How do I pick them up? The list of concerns, the list of stresses, the list of demands from parents really is quite considerable. And beyond that, beyond those stresses, we also know that parents are influenced and experience a whole range of different emotions when they're supporting their child in sport. So over the course of a lifetime or a journey with a child in sport, we know that parents can experience excitement, disappointment, joy, anger, frustration, extreme amounts of boredom when they're sitting at competitions that are taking a long time and there's nothing that they can do, worries about their own mental health, worries about their well-being, feeling physically unfit because they're spending a lot of time sitting on the sidelines. There are a lot of positives too, and seeing the joy and seeing the benefits that their child experiences. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's both a challenging experience for parents, but it's also an emotional one. It's emotional being a parent, full stop. I think if you've got children, you probably agree with that. But, in sport, there's very few other examples outside of competitive sport where you as a parent sit there and watch your child be disappointed, watch your child be frustrated, watch your child maybe not be picked or not be succeeding in the way that they want and not really being able to do anything about it. You have to wait to the end of the game. You have to wait till maybe the car journey home to try and pick them up. We don't sit there when they do exams. Maybe we do at the minute when they're doing homeschooling perhaps, but we're generally not there when they do exams. We're generally not in other achievement settings in the way that we are in sports settings. So there's a lot going on for parents, and it's much more complicated than simply telling parents to do the right thing when you start to understand the experience that they're having. And more than that, what we know is that parents really are a product, or the behaviors and the ways in which parents are involved are a product of the environments that they're in. So research tells us that parents might start out with the very best intentions, with all of the things that we would recommend around focusing on enjoyment and regulating the types of comments they make, monitoring their reactions, But because they're in an environment which is emotionally charged, because they're in an environment where there may be other parents behaving in a different way, or where there is a focus on winning and losing, or there is comparison to others, or there's selection, parents start to get socialized and they start to change some of their thoughts and some of their feelings, and they actually start to become involved, not all parents, but some parents, in ways that we might think are inappropriate or negative in terms of, providing feedback in the car journey home. But actually parents think that that is what a good parent does in that context, because that's what everyone's doing within the environment. And so if we want to really work with parents, if we want to really have positive interactions and positive relationships with the parents that we're engaging with, we not only need to understand how important parents are and how influential their involvement is, we also need to consider the environment that we're creating and consider what's going on for parents, because those things, the environment, the experiences that parents have, impact on how they are engaged, how they support, and how they ultimately interact with other parents, coaches, and children. So this is where my idea, and this is where the research around this parent positive environment has really come from. Now, I'm sure because your coaches who've signed up to a session around parents, that these are not the sorts of things that you would say. But I've had many, many, many conversations with coaches, and when I ask them about parents, these are a select few of the words that they choose to share around parents. And when you do a quick scan of social media or the print media, if you still go that way, these are some of the terms that you see frequently bandied around parents. The recent success of Emma is Raducanu, if that's how you say her last name, is everywhere in the media in the UK at the moment, because we have someone who's British who won a Grand Slam tennis tournament. So you would think we've never succeeded in sport ever, the amount of coverage that it's getting. But I just saw today that the headline around her winning is an indication of why you shouldn't have pushy parents. And there's been headline after headline messaging and targeting parents as a result of her win, because she talks about playing multiple sports, because she talks about how she tried to reach her parents' desires, etc. And the word that's always bandied around is pushy. Pushy parents, pushy parents, pushy parents. And it is something that we talk about a lot, and we do have a tendency to use quite negative language when we talk about parents. And when I talk to coaches, it almost always comes with a caveat of, it's not all parents, but those parents that are difficult or over-involved or pushy, they take up all of my time. But the reflection that I have, or the question that I would pose to coaches when they are using negative language, or when they are getting caught up on those negative experiences with parents, is how is that subsequently impacting on the environment, the culture, and your interactions that you're having with parents? Because one of the things you almost always hear when working in different environments is this idea that I've got to deal with parents. Natasha introduced it very nicely around working with parents, which is great. This is recognizing parents as people that we can engage with and we can work with positively. But this idea of dealing with parents often comes from this really negative perception of parents because of the challenges that are perhaps associated with them. But if we want to flip that, if we want to really engage with parents and we want to have positive interactions with them, what I would suggest, and what research we've done would suggest, is that there's 3 really, really important things which can change the culture of a club, which can change the culture of an organization, and which can help parents to be involved in more positive ways. And that is creating an environment where parents feel valued. So as a parent, you know your child better than anyone else. And coaches might know a sport better than the parents, but the parents will know the child better. And if we start to dismiss parents, or if we don't value the knowledge that parents have and what they bring, then it's really hard for parents to feel part of the journey, to feel part of the experience, and that can become a source of tension. Beyond feeling valued, it's also about feeling respected. So we know that when parents feel respected, when we recognize what they're contributing, when we recognize the knowledge and the experiences that they have, and we see them as a team member, when we work with them, parents are more likely to engage in a positive and appropriate manner, both with athletes or children, and with coaches, and with other parents, and with other with officials and referees. And then finally, it's about making parents feel welcome. Now that might seem a bit of a strange situation. I'm sure many of you are sitting there going, well, of course we welcome parents, we say hi and we bring them in, but it's not uncommon for coaches to try and keep parents a little bit at a distance, keep them at arm's length. And yes, you're friendly enough, but you're not friendly. Or you say hi and then you want to stop the interactions. But one of the most positive things I've seen, and one of the things I take great pleasure in seeing is this photo here. It's at the bottom here. It's a few years old now, but I was doing some work in rugby and talking to coaches and things around welcoming parents and making them feel respected and valued and bringing them into the team. And at the end of a big rugby festival, when they took the team photo, they invited the parents in to the photo to show them that they were part of the team. And it had a really big impact on the players and on the parents and on the coaches to just say, you are welcome here, you are respected, and you are valued. And the research that we've done to date really does support that this sort of an environment is one that not only do parents desire, but it's one where parents feel that they will then be supported. And when parents feel supported and have more positive experiences, then they're able to engage with the young people and with coaches in the best possible ways. So the question I assume you all will have is, that's all great, but how do we do this? What does this actually mean for us in practice? Well, there's a whole bunch of different things, and I am not going to suggest that I have all of the solutions. And what I would hope is you have a great community here of people who've signed in, and maybe you can bounce ideas between each other and you can sort of brainstorm different ideas. I've posed this question within England to all of our rugby academies. So there's 14 different academies in England, and we posed this sort of question, and every academy came up with different approaches that work for them. And so the key here is working out what will work with your parents to create that environment and to make them feel valued, respected, and welcomed. But there's a few suggestions that I have. One, do you make time for them from a social perspective? Can you sit and have a coffee? Can you have a social event, a barbecue, an end of year celebration, a kickoff for the start of the season? Do you have opportunities to really get to know parents as individuals and for them to get to know you? As soon as you have opportunities to socialize, to make time in a different manner, it's beneficial for parents. One, because they start to feel welcome in the environment. Two, you as coaches start to have an opportunity to share with parents, what's going on for you, what are some of your challenges, your demands, so parents get a better feel of what's happening. Parents also have a chance to get to know each other, and then they feel very welcome in the environment, and they can start to share lifts, etc. Do you welcome questions and feedback? Now, lots of us say we take feedback, but how do you then respond to it? Welcoming feedback and accepting feedback and responding to feedback are slightly different things. And, do you encourage feedback? Do you then respond to it? So it's very easy to get feedback, and if it's feedback we don't like, we ignore it and we push it to the side. But if we want parents to be a part of this journey with us, do you have some mechanisms? And it might be useful to have sort of formal mechanisms, so it's not texts every night, all night from parents giving you feedback, but some set times in the season or some set times in the year through specific forums, conversations, to seek feedback and to evaluate as a collaboration what's going on and how can we progress together. Also, how do you communicate? So, I've seen some really great examples of this where some coaches I've worked with each week, they'll pick up the phone and they'll specifically phone 1 or 2 parents. And that means, okay, it might only be once or twice in a season that you get a specific phone call from the coach, but it helps the parents to feel part of the journey. It gives them an opportunity to get to know you. Or, regular email updates, having opportunities maybe once a week or before a match, I will be here at this time. You can drop in and you can ask me questions, or this is an opportunity to talk, or during a training session, during a lap of the pitch, maybe you've set a drill up, maybe you've set a game up, and just doing a lap, checking in how a parent's doing. That formal and informal communication can be really, really helpful in helping parents to feel that you are respecting them and you're valuing what they have to contribute. One of the suggestions I always make here, and my grad students laugh about it because I literally say it every time, is jotting a few things down on a whiteboard. What are you doing in a session today? What could parents reinforce at the end of the session? Couple of lines to guide conversations with parents helps you to show the parents that you're bringing them in, that you want their involvement and their contribution. And it also helps you because it will help parents to reinforce the messages that you've been working on and that you want to share. Can you help to reduce or address some of the challenges that parents might be encountering? Driving, is one of the big issues, the amount of time, trying to get multiple children to different places at the same sort of time. If you set up parents forums, if you talk to parents around, what sorts of challenges are they having, in terms of attending sessions, can you help parents match up with other parents who they could maybe share lifts with? Those sorts of strategies can be really, really useful. And again, showing parents that you respect their demands, you respect all of the other aspects of their lives that they're trying to manage. Can you provide parents with support and with guidance? Can you anticipate the sorts of challenges that may be encountered through a season? Can you talk with your players and ask them what sort of support they want, what sort of feedback they want from their parents, and then communicate that to parents themselves? That could be in formal sessions if you wanted, but you may have got the idea from how I talk that I'm all about informal. So that could just be communicated through slips of paper, emails, quick chats with parents at the end of sessions. It doesn't have to be this hour-long session where we're going to sit down, but regularly providing some guidance and helping parents to anticipate what's going to come can be really, really helpful. Thinking about the time commitment that's required from parents and how you can help them to best manage the time associated with sport is really, really one of the most positive things that I think parents highlight from coaches. And what do I mean there? Well, it's really around respecting parents' time. And so if you're going to send communication to parents around what's happening, at the weekend, can you give them as much notice as possible? Can you consider the consequences of late cancellations, late schedule changes, the benefits of pre-planning for parents so that their time is protected and that, they aren't having to make last minute changes or adapt to last minute expectations. Because really, parents are very time poor, and anything you can do that demonstrates a respect for, the small amount of time they have is really, really beneficial. And linked to that is also a respect for maybe some of the commitments that parents have, some of the expectations that are placed on parents around different events, times of year, with regards to societal expectations. So, as a parent, there's big commitments and there's big requirements around Christmas in general, or around other holidays. And sometimes we ramp up sport at those sort of times of year because maybe there's, more opportunities for games, etc. But then it can become really challenging for parents. So understanding, what is their calendar? What are the time pressures What are those commitments and those expectations that they're feeling outside of sport, and what can you do as a coach to adapt or manage the schedule that you're putting together? All of those things can be really beneficial, and there's different ways that you can go about addressing that. Expanding on just a few of those ideas to give, a little bit more of a practical insight into this. The first one, and I've highlighted it a little bit in this presentation, is really taking time to understand parents' experiences. So I talked at the beginning about how challenging and demanding parenting children involved in sport can be. And it's really easy to dismiss those things, or to forget those things, or to get caught up in, how important what you're doing is. But, as a parent, parents are trying to manage not just sport, they're trying to make sure their child is happy, socialized, developing appropriately, that they're fulfilling the expectations of society of what it is to be a good parent. And then they're trying to also, in many cases, have their working life, their family life, potentially a social life, although I can't see how parents ever fit that in, a little bit of time to themselves, some sort of identity. And all of these experiences and all of these demands are kind of confounded and can come to a head within a sports situation. Now, I'm not saying as a coach you have to sit down with every parent and give them a counseling session and try and work out what's going on for them, but just being cognizant of the different challenges and demands that parents might be encountering can be really, really helpful in helping you to create an environment which is welcoming and accepting of them. Even simple things such as thanking parents for making the time, acknowledging, that you appreciate they've had to balance different things. If you have got to send something out last minute, recognizing the consequences that might have on other areas of their life can be really, really positively received from parents. And in seeking to understand parents' experiences, there's a huge benefit for you as well as coaches in that you might start to understand what parents can bring to you. So we often talk about parents, and we use this term sport parents, and in my mind it brings together this homogenous group of people who are all the same, who are acting in a certain way with this desire for sort of sporting success for their child. But all of those people are individuals, and they will have expertise in finance and law and teaching and development and psychology and all sorts of different areas, which actually, if you spend time getting to know parents, and if you spend time trying to understand their experiences, you might realize that there's a lot of positives that they can bring. Or you might start to understand, why do they always question you in this aspect? Well, actually, it's linked to them as individuals. So the more you can take time to understand what's going on for parents, the better. I'll use an example here. If I was working with a club who will remain nameless, and one of the challenges that the coaches raised was, the parents just don't stay around. Like, they're really uninvolved. They never come. We never see them. It's really hard to communicate with them. And I was, okay, that's challenging. Let's talk about that a little bit. And we started to unpack it, and we started to try and work out what's going on. And we realized that because of where they lived in London, a lot of the children were coming on the train, coming on the tube on their own. Their parents were in very high pressure jobs, working long hours. They couldn't come with them. And it wasn't that the parents didn't want to engage. It wasn't that the parents were uninterested. It was simply logistics around how children were getting to training and what was going on for the parents. Similarly, we've had a situation, where coaches were really, really struggling to engage with a set of parents, couldn't understand why they never came to any meetings. We had a conversation, and we realized they lived abroad. So they were never going to be at a local meeting because they didn't live, their child was at boarding school, and the parents were never going to be able to be present in person. So these, you're probably sitting there going, well, surely you would know these things, but actually, until you start to put yourself in the situation of understanding what's going on for parents, it can be quite easy to miss some of those situations. The next thing is really proactively seeking to support parents. In my experience, the time spent upfront working with parents, getting to know them, and then proactively demonstrating that you want to support them so they can be involved in the best possible ways will pay dividends all the way through the year and going forwards. As parents, when we talk to parents, they always talk about learning through trial and error. I did this, it didn't work, so then I did something else. Or I had one kid, it didn't work out in sport, and so we've tried a different approach with another child. You know, and sometimes they got 3 or 4 children that they're still trying to work it out with. But as coaches, you've got loads of experience. You know the sorts of situations that might be encountered. You know the reactions that people might have to different situations. You know how likely it is that a child might get injured and a parent standing on the sidelines is starting to worry about the injury of their child. You know all of these different things, and you have loads of information that you can share with parents so that they can anticipate what's coming, so that they can start to think about the emotions that they may experience, plan how they might react in different situations. A colleague of mine calls it a pre-mortem. So rather than doing a post-mortem and reacting to the situations, can we anticipate those situations and plan for what we're going to do if those situations arise? As a parent, you can have these conversations as a coach, having these conversations with parents helps them to feel that you really want to help them give their children the best possible experience. Some of you will be sitting there going, I already have way too much to do as a coach. I don't have time to be doing this. Just to reiterate, I'm not saying you need to set aside an hour, 2 hours every week to work with parents. This might be at the end of a training session early in the season. You pull everyone in and you say, well, we've got a competition coming up. In my experience, this is what these teams are like. These are the sorts of situations we might encounter. Just to give you a heads up around that, do you think you could go away and reflect and think about, what you might do in those situations? You can also give situations to the athletes or the young people you're working with. So little slips of paper with different scenarios. All right, take this home and have the conversation. So your child's got injured, your child's played really poorly, your child has behaved really poorly. How are you going to react? How would you have that conversation? And role playing those situations between parents and children, give an opportunity for them to have a conversation around, what would work and how might they react in those situations. Parents, in my experience, really do want some guidance around the sorts of conversations that they might want to have and behaviors that might be useful at competitions. Now, my caveat here is I would steer clear of giving a long list of these are the behaviors that are acceptable and these are the behaviors that aren't acceptable. Because if you think about what I just said, the environment often dictates the behaviors parents display. So it can be really hard to just avoid certain behaviors. But instead, what you can encourage is for parents to reflect on why they might react in certain ways and what type of conversations their particular child would like. Using the words of the young people that you're working with and encouraging parents to have conversations directly with their child around what they want is really, really powerful. Parents generally respond more positively to the words of young people than they do maybe coaches, sports psychs, or others. And really importantly, as a coach, being consistent in your approach and being really, really clear in terms of how you consider competitive situations and what is appropriate in your setting, aligned with your philosophy, is really key and can really help parents to reconsider competitions. So I have a real bugbear around certain coaches, and again, I'm sure it's none of you who are online here who say, I can't stand the fact that parents are all about winning and losing, and the first thing they ask is the score. And then those same coaches are coaches who are posting scores online, celebrating their wins, and really emphasizing the successful season that they've had. So, if we're going to encourage parents to take developmental approaches, to not get caught up on winning and losing, then as coaches, we've got to make sure we're doing the same, and that we are living and breathing the philosophy and the approach that we want parents to adopt. So one of the things I would say as a coach around supporting parents in this area is have an honest conversation at the start of the season. Discuss the expectations that you have as a collective, rather than coaches telling parents and parents maybe doing something else, but really having conversation around, well, what is our philosophy? How do we think about competition? How are we gonna react here? Can be really useful. And then finally, you know, I've talked about understanding parents, I've talked about supporting parents, but then it's about, you know, and these all tie together, is proactively working with parents, seeing them as a valuable member of the team, seeing them as people who can contribute, who do have valid concerns, particularly in the current climate that we have, where very unfortunately we're seeing a lot of cases around abuse being raised in a number of different countries. You know, we have to recognize that parents are the number one person that young people are likely to talk to around this, and we have to recognize that parents can and should be comfortable and confident to raise issues if needed. Encourage parents to work with other parents, create support networks, create parent forums, give opportunities for parents to be communicated with and to communicate with parents, so that parents are part of the team and that you are proactively working with them. All of those strategies and all of those different approaches really will ensure that parents, one, feel welcome, but they can positively contribute to what you are trying to achieve. To do any of those things and all of those things that I've suggested, the first place to start, or one of my suggestions to start, is to reflect on yourself as a coach and reflect on the club or the organization that you're working with, and go, actually, to what extent have we considered parents' needs in the work that we're doing? And it wouldn't surprise me if the answer is not at all. And it wouldn't surprise me if the answer is actually quite a lot. You know, people are in very different places on this journey, but actually, you know, if you want to work with parents and you want to have positive interactions with parents, and you want parents to be involved in the best possible ways, recognizing the fact that the environment and the culture impacts on them means that one of the places you need to start as a coach is understanding, you know, what is the environment and what is the culture that you're creating. So what does that all mean in sum? Well, hopefully I sold you on how important parents are. If I didn't do that, then that's not great. But hopefully you've bought into the fact that, you know, parents really are an important part of the journey, and they will have a positive influence, but only if they're involved in the best ways. And being involved in the best ways is not straightforward. It is challenging for parents, and you as coaches can play a really, really important role in helping parents to be involved in the best possible way. And my suggestion for doing that is to not focus on specifically targeting individual behaviors of parents, but rather to consider the environment that you're creating so that it does facilitate positive involvement. And that, in a nutshell, is about 15 years of research summarized very briefly. So I am more than happy to take any questions and any thoughts and any reflections that any of you may have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Camilla. And I just want to say I really enjoyed that presentation. I found it helpful myself. I've gone through the transition of being, you know, a full-time coach without children to a parent, and now a parent, a sport parent and coach. And it is an interesting journey. And I love your approach on the environment, because I would agree that that's so key. I'm going to open it up to everyone. If you have questions, please feel free to unmute. As long as it's working one at a time, we'll try this way. And if it doesn't, we'll use the raise hand function. But let's go ahead. Does anyone have any questions for Camilla? We always start off quiet. There you go, Robert.
Hi there. No, that was great. Lots of good reinforcement, I think, of I'm a teacher by education, so I kind of treated sport all along as kind of my classroom, and obviously parental involvement's core to all that. So, and having raised two young people, I made conscious effort, but made a lot of mistakes too, because all the same stuff you're talking about, sometimes you kind of, the drives homes weren't always the most positive sometimes, and it sometimes it's hard to kind of do that. There's a couple of things, and you might not be aware of some of the stuff that's happened. Over the past 10 years, I've been involved in badminton, Nova Scotia, and Antigonish badminton for 20 years. And I'm involved in like a multi-sport initiative here in Antigonish and hub community, sport hub. And so I'm all over sport here in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. So one of the things we did about 10 years ago is there used to be an initiative at Sport Nova Scotia called Fair and Safe Play. It used to be listed in every rink and every community field and stuff like that. And it kind of disappeared. And when I kind of got involved at the board level here at badminton, I went looking for it again, because one of the things we struggle with is I'm a big frameworks and principles person, and everything that you're saying makes sense, but across all the different sports, not just in Nova Scotia, but Canada, community sport, provincial sport, national sport, we struggle because parents are getting bombarded with, principles on parenting this and principles on parenting that. And it's like health tells you one thing, justice tells you another thing, education tells you something else. So I found that to be overwhelming for people. So, but in Canada, we're actually quite fortunate. The Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport had come up with a movement, and I'm not sure if you're aware of it, called True Sport. And it's been around for about 10 years, and it's probably one of the least promoted things in Nova Scotia that I've ever seen in my life. And it's got great principles for athletes and coaches, but it's also got them for communities. And one of the things that I think this is great that we're doing this, but I think it's time. Then Sport Nova Scotia came out with a really nice initiative a couple of years ago called Sport Makes a Difference. And they had everybody take the pledge. And what I find frustrating, and there's also another tool out there that Nova Scotia has that it's well, I'm a facilitator in it called High Five, and it's all about developmental sport and young people in their developmental stuff. So we've got High Five, we've got the Sport Makes a Difference pledge, and we've got the True Sport principles. We've got this we don't need new material. What we're missing is the less is more thing. Like, how do we get all sports from community to provincial to national sports, talking to parents as young people progress through a community sport to a high performance provincial sport to a national team kind of level, that these True Sport principles, that these High Five kind of principles, safe sport kind of initiatives, and then, the Sport Makes a Difference kind of pledge stuff is just constantly in front of them. Right. And so I think everything that you're saying is completely valid. But what happens is when you're in if you're not inundated, with a consistent framework or set of principles, people are hearing so many different messages. So I think what would be really great is, I don't know how familiar with True Sport or High Five or, the Sport Make a Difference campaign, but if you could take a look at that for the next session, because I think we have what we need. We need sometimes you can't be a prophet in your own hometown. And so sometimes I think it'd just be really helpful if we stop, trying to reinvent the wheel, and we take all the hard work that people have done, like yourself and the Sports Center Ethics and Sport Nova Scotia, and let's just deliver it better. Let's just do a really much better job of rolling it out. That's I guess not a question, but it's like I would like for you to take a look at what's already here in Nova Scotia, and maybe in your next session you could kind of include that as some of the applied part, like how could we be applying that stuff better?
Yeah, for sure. And it's I had the great pleasure of doing my PhD in Canada, which is where I did it at the University of Alberta, which is where the link to Calgary comes. So I'm aware of some of those programs, but definitely haven't gone into them in a lot of detail. I've always thought that Canada has got a really nice approach around these sorts of things, but I agree with you. If we're bombarding people with too many different approaches and too many different bits of information, and particularly the point you made there around parent in this way for this and parent in this way for this and parent, it is too much. And it's one of the reasons that actually, and not to avoid what you've said, because it's a very valid and definitely we'll take a look at those things, but it's also one of the reasons where actually what I'm trying to encourage is just, as coaches, as organizations, as clubs, can we just reflect on what we're doing personally and just try and make sure we're creating an environment which is welcoming? which is respectful, which is valued. And you might do that in really different ways, and it may align directly with true sport principles, or it may align directly with other principles, but actually, it can be really simple changes, just, learning parents' names. It's one of my big frustrations, since I've become a parent, I'm just mum. And I'm like, I'm not mum. Like, I have a whole lot of other things that go on. But I pick my son up from nursery. He's only 2. But I pick him up from nursery. He's like, hi, mum. I'm like, I'm not your mum. I'm his mum. But we see that with coaches, just taking the time, So I agree, definitely agree with your point, and I would love to, more than happy to look at your resources. But I think there's another layer here, which is simply reflecting on, just those general approaches that, everyone has to parents.
Yeah.
It's also why I haven't come out with a whole new initiative of like, this is how you've got to parent.
Well, to your point, rapport building with people is the point. Like, you're trying to build a genuine, sincere rapport. And I think, again, though, I wish common sense was common. Okay, but unfortunately it's not. And so therefore, in the absence of what's obvious from a common sense or empathy point of view for other people, sometimes you kind of have to be able to point. So I actually got the True Point sport principles made up into banners. And at the start of every badminton event we had for the last 10 years, I put these at the entrance, and I've had to take about 7 parents out and reintroduce them to the banners that they walked past as they entered the facility, because they were violating the basic principles of, of the event and the environment, and trying to create that welcoming kind of rapport. And after that, like, I don't know, it's like some kind of like light bulb went off, and they understood, like, oh, you're serious. It's like, yeah, we're serious. Like, this has got to be a developmentally attentive and responsive place for them to play. So anyway, I've taken up too much time, but yeah, if this was great. I think I agree with you. Less is more. Start with the simple things of being good people. But I think also at the same time, if we could, sometimes you have to point to other authorities like Sport Nova Scotia or Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic or True Sport and Centre for Ethics and stuff like that, and say, look, we're not making this up. This is based on good solid research and kind of stuff. So thank you for your time. I enjoyed it immensely.
And Robert, I'll just give you a quick update that we've been doing a little more work trying to get the True Sport principles out more broadly. So there's some work being tied in now with the VIP coaching program and the promotion of the True Sport principles. So we also agree and are very aware of them, and are trying to also get it out as part of the Safe Sport initiatives across Nova Scotia. So hopefully, I know they're 10 years old, but hopefully you will start to see them a little more broadly.
Yeah. Well, it's still gaining momentum. Like, it's slow and steady. Slow and steady to me is way better than fast and burnt out. But the other thing I will ask too, Natasha, like, is that whole sport makes a difference mantra thing that Sport Nova Scotia came up with. That was really good. And I was really, I went looking for it while I was on the call with you guys, and it's nowhere to be found linked on the website that I can find.
Robert, was that the multi-sport campaign that was done a couple of years ago? That one? No,
it's the one that says, I love to watch you play. It had the video and the pledge. And if you look up, it's under advocacy, but you actually have to do a search for it on the website on Sport Nova Scotia, because it's not, I can't find it linked anywhere.
Yeah, I remember that campaign.
Okay. So to me, it's like, there's a really nice, simple, like what you're saying is, there's a really nice, simple thing that was done, really positive. It ran its course. It was on TV. It did some stuff, and then it just went away.
Yeah, and we're still seeing the issues, obviously, because the coaches are asking for sessions like this and saying, they need help. So
Well, and the biggest issue I have right now is like abuse of young officials in lots of major sports, which I won't name, but it's like, we still have a problem with parents understanding, like, that the whole process of sport is, convening power and developmental, growth and development stuff. So anyway, I'm ranting, sorry.
No, that's okay, Robert. We should connect separately, but I will, I want to open it up if anyone else has any questions for Camilla. Does anyone else have any questions? No problem.
I did have a question. Like, when you are confronted with a situation of a problematic parent who's, it's very clear that they're in the wrong, but it's very difficult to broach trying to reason in that situation, because obviously, like, it's a very complex and interwoven situation where it can be perceived that you're challenging their status as a parent. And one thing that I find that I get involved in frequent at times is I don't have kids, and so when I try to resolve a conflict, sometimes that gets called into question, and so I'm basically discredited as a professional because I don't have kids and I don't understand the situation. So what would be your best recommendation as to a first step to intervene in that situation and try to de-escalate?
So are you talking kind of in the moment? So maybe in a competition, or you're sort of witnessing a situation and you want to de-escalate it then, or sort of I know after the fact you want to have a conversation around what you've sort of seen?
It's it's more so I had a parent come to me and challenged basically everything that we were doing professionally, and it had to do with her kid, from a selection standpoint, programming standpoint, and she has a long history in the sport, so it was difficult to address that because there were so many different layers to it. But one thing that did come up was that, you know, I can't speak to her about certain subjects because I'm not a parent.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say it's easy. There's no easy solution to that. And I've spent 15 odd years researching in this area and I've not been a parent. So you can imagine some of the challenges that I've encountered. But my first one is, and it's very easy to say not in this situation, is to give an opportunity for them to air their views and try and not become defensive in the situation as they're airing them. Try and acknowledge, what is being said, and then decide, is it appropriate now in this conversation to try and counter it and to come back, or is it actually easier to say, you share your concerns, now give me an opportunity to take this away and to formulate a well thought out response. Because, in the same way as I would encourage parents to never approach a coach, when they've just had that selection email, like, don't phone them straight away. We talk often around the 48 hour rule. Give yourself 24 hours to cool down. As a coach, if you feel that someone's maybe questioning what you're doing, it's hard not to become defensive as well. So building in a bit of a buffer to maybe take away some of the emotion can be really, really valuable. Trying to validate the experience of the person who's raising the concerns, and then provide an explanation for what you have done, is probably exactly what you're trying to do. It doesn't always diffuse the tension, but that's what you've ultimately got to communicate. And fundamentally, and it comes to my point around, all that time that's spent up front. So, if you have clear selection policies, as clear as you can ever have with a selection policy, if you have had conversations early on around what we're expecting from each other, how we communicate, all of those sorts of things, all of that you've done in advance is then what you can draw on as your resource in that situation. And so, when I say time spent up front saves you a lot of pain down the line, it really is, considering all of the different questions you might have, all of those different things, have we covered them off at the outset? Because whilst you might not end up with a happy parent, you can at least be consistent in your policy and your approaches. With regards to the comment around, if you don't have kids, you can't understand the experience. I mean, you can't argue with the statement, right? You can't argue that you don't understand what it is to be a parent. I had no idea until I had my son. But you do have a vast experience of coaching. You understand how the people that you're working with respond in those situations. And so I would suggest that you don't try and counter the parenting, but you try and talk around what's the most supportive and beneficial and useful within the setting that you are familiar with and comfortable with. Does that make sense? So it's almost acknowledging that you're not a parent, but these are all of the expertise that I do have, and I'm drawing on these areas, because it's really hard, as you mentioned, to challenge someone's parenting. And there's actually a whole philosophical debate as to whether you should, can you, is it our right to question other people's parenting? So actually, acknowledging and then shifting the conversation entirely to something that is within your control would be sort of the safest bet. But it's not an experience that's easy to manage. I do acknowledge that.
No, I mean, fundamentally, it speaks to your point that you emphasized about creating value and especially when interacting in the moment. And fundamentally, everything that you've advised speaks to that. And I think it's very important because somebody can be incorrect in a situation, still of value. And so creating that up front, I think you're right, will help to perhaps disarm people and make them more open to a conversation and feel heard and valued.
Yeah, and I think that the key for me is no one will ever challenge something thinking they're incorrect, right? So you're always starting from a point as a parent of like, I'm raising this because I think I'm correct, or I'm not sure what's being done is correct, right? Which is slightly different. And then you counter it with, well, I think you're incorrect, and so I think it's trying to understand. And if you understand parents, and it sounds like you did know this sort of parent, but the more you understand parents in advance, the more you can kind of try and understand where that's coming from, or where that question's coming from, because in their mind it will be grounded in something that they think is right, and then you're questioning them or pushing them to reevaluate. So really trying to take that time to understand what is going on. But selection is without a doubt the thorniest issue, and I've worked with all sorts of sports, and everyone has different approaches to selection. And yeah, it's the one bit I know there's no really great solution to how to manage that. But the more you've had conversations, the more open you've been, the stronger the relationships in advance, and hopefully the fewer of those interactions that you have will be negative.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your question, Mark. That's a good one. Does anyone else have a question?
Natasha, I'm noticing a few people sort of jumping off. So at the end of the session, I'm not saying we have to end it right now, but I'm more than happy for an email to just go out with details. So if people do have questions or specific things that they want to ask and aren't comfortable asking in a group, I'm more than happy to sort of connect that way.
Yeah, that's perfect. So what I will do afterwards for everyone, I will send out a note also, Camilla, with your book title, like the titles of the book, your contact if you're okay with that, and then any links that are relevant, and we will fire that around after. And then I'll also put down the information for having you back in January for everyone, so that, yeah, those of you who attended today, it'll be really great to come back in January and dive into this a little further. And also maybe you can carry your questions through to January. So like Camilla said, we normally do end our time at 1 o'clock. So if you have to jump off, a bunch of people already did, feel free. If you want to stay on, or anyone else has another question, please ask it now, and have a great day. So yeah, I will stay on and hang out.